ready. I'm just got my eyes on a bunch of things.
It's coming.
No problem. I'll wait for your cue.
Yeah, here we go. We are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is going to be a super pumped episode, guys. So hope you're strapped in for a cliffhanger. That's because I've got none other than the man, the legend, Ken Londoner on the show, the founder and CEO of Biosig out of New York. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Legend, I'm not sure, but I do enjoy your program. So thanks for having me.
Privilege is all mine. So I've had the privilege of getting to know you, Ken. It feels like months ago.
Yes.
But finally, we got you back here. But for our viewers around the world, Ken, who haven't heard about Biosig and you know, Ken Londoner, the legend, why don't you kick us off with a bit about your background? I'd love for you to touch a bit about your experience listing companies on the NASDAQ, and then give us the origin story to Biosig.
Thank you so much. So I'm the speed limit in terms of age, 55. I started my career in New York as a young analyst on Wall Street, working for a top money management firm called Seligman. Seligman's claim to fame was they were known as one of the top technology investors in the United States. We had a flagship product that people really appreciated. The performance of our investment, people were really strong. I myself started from the bottom, not the mailroom, but started, you know, as a lowly analyst and made my way to money manager. So we were investing in publicly traded growth companies back in the 90s when things were like very new. You know, PCs were new, cell phones were new, the internet didn't exist, you know, and so on and so forth. The whole semiconductor industry was really still in its early phases of expansion. There was so much growth; it was incredible. We were in a different time in the global economy. Globalization was a trend, but it wasn't as full blown as it had become. So I cut my teeth learning from some of the greatest publicly traded companies, from Walt Disney to Home Depot to Walmart, you name it. We were probably investing in it. And I was one of the first mutual fund managers to leave the mutual fund industry and join the hedge fund business. So I started a hedge fund from scratch back in 1996, ran it for almost 7 years, and got to experience the dot-com crash, managing quite a large sum of money. I can say that was probably one of the toughest periods of my career. It was brutal. And, you know, the NASDAQ was down 76% in 2000. And it was a little reminiscent of this environment, by the way. Just a lot of companies struggling, failing, a lot of disharmony in the global economy. You know, everything recovered. And, you know, I had built up a desire to actually, instead of being on the sidelines investing in these companies, I sort of thought, you know, after 9/11 was an opportunity to make a change, because that was a pretty rough time for New Yorkers. I was a New Yorker. And I said, you know, this is the right age, right time. I had some capital. I wanted to figure out how to build a company, a public company of all matters. And so I had a few, you know, apprentice jobs to learn how to do it. I learned by observing and watching other successful public company leaders in terms of actually how to construct a public company. And the reason I came into the medical technology business is because, one, I had spent years investing in that sector, and secondly, it was a business that a smaller entrepreneur could build a sustainable competitive advantage in. So I partnered with a group of engineers out of UCLA who had this great idea about how to bring an improvement to heart surgery. And we started Biosig in February of 2009 from scratch. Everything was from scratch. The money was from scratch, meaning my money was invested originally, and then we raised money from others. And, you know, we've gotten the company down the road. We're about almost 14 years of age. Mm-hmm. As a public company, we went on to the NASDAQ in November of 2018.
Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting facts that I identified when I first met you, Ken, was you actually worked with Sol Kerzner in the financing of Atlantis in the Bahamas. So for my US audience and everybody else who doesn't know who the hell Sol Kerzner is, he's like the godfather of entrepreneurship in Africa, like really did incredible things internationally, and he came from very humble beginnings in Africa. Ken, what was your experience of Sol Kersner? What did he, being such an incredible visionary, teach you about building things that matter?
Yeah, great question. And that was, I was in my analytical assignments. Gaming and lodging was one of the industry sectors that I was assigned. So I got to research and learn about all these emerging and established growth companies in those sectors. So Sun International Hotels, which was the public company based out of South Africa, decided they would do a listing in the United States on the NASDAQ. I can't remember the ticker symbol. I think it was like SIHLY or something like that. Five symbols, which is rare. And I heard about this project in the Bahamas called Atlantis. So many of your viewers know what modern day Las Vegas is, right? These large emporiums, highly decorated and themed, with these great restaurants and famous shows and gambling parlors, etc. That was all started by Steve Wynn basically back in 1989. The old Las Vegas was this old sort of less exciting place, and then they basically gentrified it. So I don't know how Saul Kirstner got the idea to bring that kind of style facility to the Bahamas, but he bought Merv Griffin's old place down in Paradise Island and raised a lot of money and had this concept that he was transporting from South Africa to the United States. And I had the privilege of learning about it, getting to know the family, from an investor perspective. And they were personable, approachable, friendly. They were courting our investments, so they had to be nice to us. And, the guy always struck me as sort of like unique, right? Because he wasn't from the United States. He was bringing an imported concept to an island off the coast of the United States. And then they went from that success to opening up one of the first Indian gaming facilities in Connecticut. And that was a brilliant facility. I used to go walk that site while it was under construction, and he would always be there with these rosary beads. He was very, I don't know if he was superstitious or religious, but he had these rosary beads he would twist in his hands. And I can sort of relate to needing some sort of superstitious thing. I don't want to show you what I have. It's actually not for air's sake, but I have a few things that I play around with to relieve stress. Anyhow, he was just a dynamic guy, really great guy. And his son, Butch, who unfortunately died in a helicopter accident, he was his father's right hand. He was responsible for a lot of the operations. So they were great people. They were, I would say they were pioneers in some ways, and so that would be my answer, long-winded answer to your question.
Well, you're definitely a pioneer too. So maybe let's change gears, Ken, and talk a bit about Bioseg for a moment. So what is the problem that you guys are essentially solving as a business and team?
Sure. So I was put onto this concept by Mark Josephson, who is the chairman of cardiology at Harvard Medical School. And it's a long story how I knew him and why I knew him, but I was up there in 2008 working on another project, and he had introduced me to the engineer that I ended up forming the company with. And he was telling me that the heart surgery called cardiac ablation, which is a minimally invasive surgical procedure to treat rapid heart rhythms. So when your heart races, and it's not because you ran a traffic light or you got some bad news and you have adrenaline making your heart race, your heart races for different reasons, but it's a medical condition. They call that arrhythmia. And back in the 80s, they sort of discovered that if they went into your heart with wires and could burn heart tissue with radio frequency energy, and then also they now freeze heart tissue as well. But if they deaden the cells around your pulmonary veins, your heart could potentially go back to a normal rhythm. So that's how they treat it. They call that pulmonary vein isolation. What Dr. Josephson pointed out to me is that the technology they have in the operating room is great, but there's some imperfections. And one of the imperfections is in a standard operating room where they do these procedures in US hospitals, there's millions and millions of dollars of medical equipment that is used in concert with each other to allow the surgeon to know exactly what's going on in this very complicated procedure. So think of like NASA. There's so much technology, and it all is emitting interference. The machines themselves create distortion in some of the critical information that they're trying to understand. One of the critical elements they're trying to know precisely is the heart signals that come from inside your heart. They call those electrocardiograms. They're intracardiac signals. They get that information by placing an antenna inside your heart. They thread it through your groin, and they're reading how your heart's performing electrically from the inside out. They think that's one of the best ways to understand exactly what's going on with your heart's electrical system. The problem with getting that information is with all the other machines that are operating in such a small environment, the precision of that information is compromised by noise, by the interference emitted by both the machines and also sometimes the electricity in the walls. And so they need to know precisely what's going on so they can optimize the therapy. So our engineers figured out a way through hardware design and through software to basically eliminate the interference from that very important input in their surgical decision making. And by making it better, we can improve the quality of the procedure and shorten the time of the procedure. Those are two valuable elements for both the physician and also the hospital. So medical technology, if it's done right, brings value, saying they can do it better, faster, and less expensively. And for the US medical system, given how many people are now coming into it as the population ages, the thing that attracted my attention beyond the opportunity was it's a big growth market. And it doesn't matter what's going on in the world. People who are aging have hereditary or lifestyle-induced problems, and they need to be treated. And people will go get treated, whether it's through their own insurance paying for it or whether it's the government paying for it. So it's a major growth market, and we entered this market as from scratch as a startup in February of 2009.
So, Ken, do we have any idea on like what causes arrhythmia in the first place? I know you mentioned hereditary, maybe diet and things like that, but is there a commonality in terms of cause?
That's a very good question. To keep it simple for this broadcast, there are triggers. Snoring is a trigger for all these viewers who are paying attention to this video. If you snore, you have to go get it treated, because think about it. When you're snoring, you're not breathing properly. You're not getting the proper oxygenation of your blood at night. So your blood is not rich with oxygen. That causes your heart to have to pump harder. Think about how many times your heart beats a night, and then think about how many nights you sleep and how many years this goes on. So people who have what's called sleep apnea, that's a well-known trigger for arrhythmia. Obesity, alcoholism, recreational drug use, and then hereditary factors are some of the common causes of a rapid heart rhythm. The danger of a rapid heart rhythm when your heart's racing, it's like an engine. When your engine's racing in your car and it's doing it unnaturally, you're going to burn out the engine. You're going to burn out the pistons. You're going to burn through your oil, whatever the case may be. With your heart, you've got to get it fixed. And there are two solutions that are available to people today when they have these abnormal heart rhythms. You can have a therapy through medication, or you can have this minimally invasive surgical procedure. There are a few other things you can do, but we feel like the therapy is really the first line, your first choice, because if they get it right, it's usually somewhere between a 2 and a 4 hour procedure on average. You're sedated, you're asleep, and then you leave the hospital that day if all goes well. So you're cured at that point. Where we come in is where they don't have the precise information. We're trying to improve the odds that you get it right the first time. And sometimes they don't get it right the first time because it is a very complicated, it's a complicated challenge for them to solve. It doesn't mean they don't know how to do the procedure. They're really good at it, but sometimes they miss the right spot. And when they miss the right spot, the arrhythmia will come back and they'll have to go have it done a second time, which nobody wants to do. So that's where we come into play.
Okay, fantastic. I was just looking at the the global arrhythmia markets. Let me bring it up for everybody. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by this because it's growing as a market. The current market, well, it's forecast to be some astronomical market, like $10 billion. It's currently around $7 billion as a market, but it's growing. What would you say, Ken, is driving its growth so much? Because you would think with the with the advancement in medical technology, you would hope that that would actually be coming down. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of like the problems
Yeah.
getting more acute.
I would tell you the number one driver is demographics, the aging of the industrial world. So the US, Europe, Japan, other parts of Asia, everybody's aging. The great generations are getting older. 1 out of 4 Americans over the age of 60 have this condition. And it's treatable. It's not like a guaranteed death sentence or anything. So there are solutions out there. Most people decide to take medication to start. Why? Because it just seems easier to take a pill. The problem with pills or meds is once you get on them, you can't really get off of them because you can't run the risk of what happens if you don't treat it. If you don't treat it, you can have a stroke. Very high likelihood that's going to happen. Nobody wants to have that. I don't want to talk about the side effects of that. That's always problematic. And then I think the people who have the courage to go have one of these minimally invasive procedures is they know that they go in, they have it done, there's a very good chance they're cured and they go right back to normal. So a lot of times when you have one of these rapid heart rhythms, your heart's not pumping blood properly, you don't feel well. You actually don't feel well. Some people tell me they can't really walk up a flight of stairs without being completely drained. They can't walk to their car without being exhausted, that kind of thing. So it's something that you have to get fixed, and the growth is being driven by aging, and then the other things, the lifestyle issues I talked about, obesity, snoring, alcoholism, drug abuse, that kind of stuff. And with the more pervasive use of some of this stuff, you have a growing sense. And then the last thing I'd say is there is now research starting to come in that COVID causes arrhythmia and causes conditions that can trigger these irregular heartbeats. There's not enough evidence there to know exactly how to speak to it, but I'm starting to read a lot of medical papers now where there is unfortunately a trend where this patient population is going to continue to grow. So we're expecting 13 to 15% growth every year, just based on these drivers. And so that's the thing I used to look for as being an institutional investor. Where can I go where there's almost assured growth? And so this is the market I found. It's not an easy market, but the growth of the market is pretty rest assured.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it is true what they say, isn't it? Like all boats rise with a rising tide. So market's
Yes,
going in the right direction. Hey, if you can help capture that market and create value there,
but it
that's the way.
takes. I just would say to anybody who would ever consider doing what we've done, it's a 10 to 20-year commitment. So this isn't like starting a toy store or a music label or an app and putting some money towards it and really hoping you've got the right formula. This is a long, arduous journey. Most companies fail because it's really hard to actually get the innovation right to start. But then there's everything else that goes along with it. So we're pretty proud of our almost 14-year history. But every day we do battle. Every day we work really hard to
Mm-hmm.
advance the interests of the company. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds like a podcast. It's a long commitment, at least 20 years.
Yeah.
Slow
But I
back
mean,
payback period.
yeah, but people who say, "Oh, that's too long. I could never do it." I asked them, "Do you know how long it took Walt Disney to consider himself successful? What he's published in literature? He started his original company in 1926, and he said he didn't really find the success until 1955. So that's 29 years. That's a long time, and that's Walt Disney. Now, that's back in another era, right? But if you want to have great success, I mean, Bill Gates, I don't know what he would say, or Howard Schultz, what he would say. But some of these great companies that everybody thinks, oh, it just happened, even Amazon, it took many, many, many years. And they all had a lot of ups and downs along the way. Walt Disney went bankrupt twice. Amazon in the .com crash in 2000, their stock was down like 97%. And so, these are not straight lines. These
Mm-hmm.
are complex journeys.
Yeah, it takes 15 years to become an overnight success. Don't confuse a clear line of sight with a short distance. Like I've got loads of those, because
It is,
it's true
yeah.
though. You know what you're saying. But I want to quickly talk to you about innovation and what you guys have done. You said it takes a long time to do what you've done. It's a hard science problem that you've solved. So what have you actually built?
So we built a system called the Pure EP, which is think of it as a computer. It's about the size of a small, it's about yay big, and it gets installed inside the operating theater. And we install screens in the control room where they have operators that watch over all the information. And we project our information up on a very big television screen where the surgeon is looking at a whole variety of different information to make their real-time decisions on where they move their surgical instruments to do the procedure correctly. So we're very proud of what we've been able to achieve so far in some of the leading hospitals in the United States. We're up on the big screen every day. So for example, at all the Mayo Clinic campuses, they use our technology every day to do their cardiac surgeries in this arrhythmia operating room. And so we basically take the information from inside the heart, we cleanse it of all the noise. We have very user-friendly software that displays this information in an easy to understand way where by seeing it so clearly in the way we display the information, we're actually able to save time out of the procedure because prior to us, they would have to do different manual and stop and go type of things to verify that the information they're seeing is what they want to rely on. Because with all the noise corrupting this important information, sometimes they really don't know if the information is legit or not. They don't know. Think of if your iPhone or your computer was giving you information that was correct 80% of the time, but 20% it wasn't correct. What would you do? You go crazy. If your bank account was only right 80% of the time, you go nuts. So they
Mm-hmm.
have to do these surgeries under imperfect conditions. And you say, how is that even tolerated? Well, they do a really good job prior to us, but we just help them now do it better, faster. So it's an improvement in the standard of care, we believe, and we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to publish data that is, backing up that statement.
Right.
We're doing more and more use cases, more and more evidence that the physicians are finding value in our technology. So
Hmm. So I had your investment deck up, and so if you guys are catching the audio version, head over to YouTube so you can actually see what Ken and his team have built. It's really it sounds on the face value pretty hard, a hard thing to do. How hard has it been for you, Ken? I mean, did you anticipate it being as hard a struggle as it was?
not really. I mean, everything I've done in my career is not easy. I think we can all say that about our own journeys, right? Nothing's easy in this world. But medical technology, there's such a level of precision of what has to be done, and there were certain elements of this journey that were really difficult. Translating our prototype to a design that could be manufactured correctly. Wow, that one you couldn't prepare for that. I gotta believe if Saul Kirstner was being asked the same question, where were the challenges? I mean, making that complex environment of Atlantis come alive where everything was working, I'm sure he would have hours of stories of where things weren't working well. But for us, we've had to go in phases. We had to engineer a prototype that worked. That took us about 4 years. Think about that, 4 years to just try to figure out something that is a prototype and try to get it to work. And then, we had to refine the prototype. And we were told along the way, it's kind of nice, but it's not enough. It's sort of like, okay, it's like maybe a nice to have, but the hospital's not, they don't buy nice to have things. They don't have the resources for that. They have to only buy must have things. So to become a must have thing, we have to innovate more according to a lot of the voices we were listening to. So we would go show them what we'd innovate. They'd say, this is nice, but it's still not enough. So there was a lot of back and forth with the leaders of our field trying to get enough value in the device to be a credible offering. And then we had to get regulatory approval from the FDA. That wasn't simple. I mean, we did it. Then we went public onto the NASDAQ. Being a public company when the markets are crashing, as they have been the last, year or so, that's not easy. And then, getting the customer to adopt your product.
Mm.
Customer adoption differs in different industries, like, and I've seen a lot of it over my career. I would say this life sciences is very difficult, but if you have clinical data that is clear and convincing, and it's done at the right places in the right way, that helps. You need intellectual property protection. We have a lot of that. We have a lot of patents that protect our innovation, and then you have to convince leaders, that what you're doing is worth their time, and then they have to basically pay you for that. So that's where the long process comes in. And yeah,
Mm.
it was much harder than I would have dreamed, but that's not a bad thing. I think I don't know anything that's easy that's good, right? Except maybe waking up in the morning and making a cup of coffee. That is good and that's easy. But other than that, man, it's all, the more challenging it is, I think the more rewarding it is. And so our company's attracted people who like that, challenge. And we always think about the mission, right? I will say a mission centric company is a great motivator, right? So we're trying to help people that have heart disease, and we don't ever lose sight of that mission. So when we have a tough day or a tough week or a tough month, whatever the case may be, we just think about what we're fighting for, and everybody on this team is committed to the same thing. So it makes us aligned in putting up with some of the challenges. And so, that's a motivator.
Hmm. Yeah, just to echo what you said, Ken, I put this tweet out yesterday, and I basically said like the greatest form of expression for an entrepreneur is to create something novel in the face of adversity, and the harder the adversity or the worse the adversity, the greater the opportunity. And I've
Mhm.
seen this like countless times before. Like people keep saying, "Oh yeah, no, it's easier in America." It's like, no, man, it's hard everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. And again, there's I would say context is a very important word, right? Because if you're doing what you're doing versus trying to accept the premise and iterate a SaaS company, do you know what I mean? Like you're
Yeah,
fundamentally creating an entirely new category. It's a white space. It hasn't, the your competitors, quote unquote, that are in the space have been there and no one's come in there for years. You know what I'm saying? And then
yeah.
you've come in there and you've created a better product that's disruptive, and it's like, oh shit, like that's a hard thing to do, and but that's what makes it valuable.
Yeah.
And I'm curious though to maybe let our viewers in on why the Nasdaq. Why did you? I know that was your background. You listed got plenty of companies,
Yeah.
dozens of companies. But why did you say, hey, this is an investment approach we want to use?
Well, I mean, having been in the public markets in the first part of my career, I felt very comfortable knowing using those tools to finance the business. Once you're able to get to a public market, you have enough to appeal to a public audience. You have the ability to solicit that audience for capital to help fund your business. Now, a lot of the emerging life science companies, and people know this historically, they need money to get to where they're going. And unless they're a subsidiary of a large company like Pfizer or Merck or Amgen, or you pick your favorite company, if they're independent or they're a small public company, they have to use the markets. The private markets are a market to fund innovation, but those markets have their own behaviors, and it was just my judgment that given the monies we needed and given what I thought we had to offer as a growth company, we chose the public markets. But the public markets right now are challenging, right? Because the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, and there's been a decline in everything from Amazon and Microsoft and Netflix to the smaller companies. But those cycles come and go. Having be at the age I'm at, I've seen these declines come and go many times, and we're focused on building the business. We know if we do that right, our shareholders will be rewarded. So we're really on the Nasdaq to have access to public financing,
Mm-hmm.
and find shareholders that believe in our business. And right now we have roughly 14,000 shareholders. So we're really appreciative for those who have supported us.
So, Ken, for our founders and myself included, who are trying to weigh up, because the context here, Ken, is like every founder I speak to is like raising money, like at some point, like either it's now or next quarter, what have you. And they're looking at angels, obviously there's a stage of company. So like seed is usually angels. Then you get growth companies looking at VC, family offices, that kind of thing. And then you've got mature companies who are then listing, doing reverse mergers or unlisting or whatever the case might be. What are the trade-offs to? Well, firstly, let me go back a step. How, if you were to choose the Nasdaq, why? What drives that, and what's your advice to a founder? Because I know, like, one of the things you told me was that, listen, yeah, if you're doing like 30 million a year, like you can list a company, $1 million rather. You can list on the Nasdaq if you believe that you can get there like that. And so for me, I don't think like that's like a remarkably difficult number to get to if you have something of value that you've created. So why Nasdaq as a financing vehicle, would you say? Like, when do you choose that route versus, say, looking at other funding options, VC, angels?
It's a super question. It's one that I know many people want to know a lot about and sometimes struggle to find the right answer. And sometimes we also scratch our heads. I would answer it this way. For the founders or the people who are developing these emerging businesses, the first thing you want to understand is how long do you think it's going to take to get your product or service introduced to a marketplace and be able to demonstrate growth, meaning growth in customers, growth in product revenues, growth in adoption, that kind of thing, because it's that stage where you get to that creates the most excitement and the most initial value for an investor. So the longer it takes, the less likely it is that a venture capitalist is going to get you there. VCs are great people. I have a lot of respect for VCs. They've done incredibly well over the last 30 years, but we knew in the beginning that our business would take 10 to 20 years. And why do we know that? Because every other great med tech that gets to become standard of care where it's widely adopted, that's the time it takes, 10 to 20 years. For drugs, it's about 15 to 20 years. So you can find VCs who will fund that. But remember, then VCs are usually one investor. And if that one investor doesn't like what you're doing, then what do? You don't, they basically kind of control your future. And if they're not happy with you, if you can't resolve that difference, then something's going to give. And a lot of times the company ends up suffering because people leave, new people come in, they don't have the same level of care or capability. So if you know a business, like let's take a different business. Hypothetically, you have an app and the app provides a service and you're able to develop it and get it on iOS, or you're able to get it in the Google store, what have you, and you think it has a value, you might be able to grow a market there much more rapidly because it's kind of a viral type of thing. And if you found a unique service that people will find appealing, there a VC solution might work because that's really a 3 to 5 year journey, not a 15 to 20-year journey. So the shorter the journey, the more likely an angel venture VC type funder can work. But then if it's going to take longer, you really have to figure out how's that going to work for you. And we were private for 8 years, almost 8 years, maybe close to 9 years, and we were funding through basically our own initiatives. We had a few partners helping us, finders and what have you, but we were trying to find folks who appreciated the journey we were taking. Either there was an affinity there, like their family might have heart disease, or they might have success investing in life science businesses, or they just felt what we were doing was important. Who knows? I mean, but we were able to raise private money ourselves and build a shareholder base. And then we always knew that at some point, that's kind of a finite pool of people, unless you're just super uniquely talented and you have a Rolodex of Rolodexes, but most people don't have that. So if it's a long duration situation, you've got to figure out your way to get to the public. Now, you probably know there's things such as crowdfunding and Regulation A transactions. That's a whole new world based on the Jobs Act of 2012, where you can use the internet to solicit investment for a company. You have to go to a specialist who can help you do that. But if you have a business that's appealing to a wide audience through the internet, there's another way of raising money. So there's all different ways. But for us, we medical technology is sort of like a meat and potatoes kind of industry. It's an essential industry. It's a necessary industry. It's not a discretionary industry. It's a must have. People want a better life. One of the ways to do that is medical technology. So there's a long history of public investment in the medical technology business. I mean, Medtronic, which was founded in 1956, which is one of the largest New York Stock Exchange companies, they've been public for many, many years, and they've grown huge from small based on their ability to innovate around their first core technology, and they've done an amazing job. So the public has benefited from their growth and from their success, and so we believe we'll be able to do the same thing over time.
Hmm. But you can't undo it. Do you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
it. Like once you go to the public markets, that's where you go.
Well, you can undo it, right? You can get what's called delisted, where you don't succeed. You could go out of business, and then you're no longer public. But yeah, if you make the choice, then you're signing up for a way of life. There's requirements, there's technical requirements, there's accounting requirements, and so on and so forth. So yeah, you don't make that decision lightly. And for us, we knew from day one that was the path we were going to be on. It wasn't we guessed it. We knew that would be our path. So I
Mm.
think, if you're new at this, you'll find a way to figure it out. There's plenty on the internet that you can learn about. But it really boils down to what kind of business do you have? How much money do you think you need? How long do you think it'll take to get to that launch? And then from there you can start to kind of go to the various buckets of opportunity to
Mm.
fund your company. And funding's always an issue.
Yeah, I was chatting to a, a a chap called Brennan. I'm talking to him tomorrow actually, and he is the CEO of a number of companies, but they specifically do medical hardware investing. So it's actually an
Mhm.
interesting guy. I should probably connect you to if you're open to it. But they're sitting with a number of med tech funds, so funds with capital
Mhm.
specifically looking at medical hardware, like nothing else, just medical hardware. And they've developed like the wall, like one of their startups is like the wall plug equivalent for human bones.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty hardcore like what they were doing. Anyway, so he was basically talking to me about the same thing. He was like, look, while I'm CEO, I'm actually an investor, a venture capitalist in medtech companies, hardware. And we were talking about like the long payback periods for medtech. It's like it's a specific type of mindset, isn't it? Because no capital, like 10 million from investor A is not the same as 10 million from investor B, when one's specifically sitting on a medtech fund versus someone that's just looking for like a 10, 20x return as fast as possible. Different types of investors and so forth. But I'm very empathetic. Like I'm very empathetic to the founders who are doing hard things, developing or solving hard science problems with medical technology hardware. It's like it's a whole new. If you were to tier, in my experience, if you were to put it on a pyramid and say where is it, it's right at the top. It's like the antithesis of being a founder, because like
Yeah.
not only do you have to build the thing, then you've heavily regulated industry, and then like you've got to fund the thing with investors who are cool with like a 10-year 20-year payback
Yeah.
period. It's unreal.
So you're very sharp in what you say. The thing that I would say to you is, I started investing in medical technology back in 1989. So I have enough exposure to see when you have something that works. I don't want to compare it to other things, but everybody knows the Tesla story, or at least knows something about it. And that's hardware of a different kind. A lot of innovation that went into making that vehicle. I give that guy an awful lot of credit, even though he's I don't understand Elon Musk. I think he's nuts, but I think most people would agree with me. I don't get what he's an enigma. He's a fellow countryman of yours, but my point is, um, you know, uh, innovation has to come in some of these areas, right? I was taught by one of the billionaires in the medical space. Um, he said, "Do you know why medical innovation's so compelling for an entrepreneur or somebody who take this crazy long journey?" He said, "Anybody would pay any amount of money, whether it's their money or the government's money or insurance money, to have another 6 months of life on this planet. And if you can provide that, you can give somebody that extra time to be with their loved ones, do whatever it is that they love to do, they're going to pay anything. So, that still is sort of an abstract that I think about from time to time. But like, we're not, people say, oh, you must be in this for the money. If you're in for the money, you better be prepared to, be on a diet for a while, because you don't start making money in this business till you're way far down the road. So, there has to be a mission driven motivation. For us, it's the achievement, it's the degree of difficulty, it's the unmet need, and the fact that somebody's got to do this work for these patients. And, in every category of medicine where there's progress, it's not like it's not like getting an Academy Award or a Grammy. People are doing this work because they believe in the work. They're connected to the mission. It's just who they are. And they don't worry about making a fast buck. Um, this is not that area. It just isn't. So,
Mm.
but there's a lot of rewards, and then when you finally do get there, and we're very darn close. I mean, we've already got adoption going. That adoption should start accelerating. We've sort of made it through, not completely through, because COVID's still with us, but COVID really slowed us down quite a bit. But we've endured, and now we're getting more and more traction because of the quality of what we've developed. And we look at the next 10 years as being pretty exciting for us. So and so they say no pain, no gain. The more the pain, the better the gain. That's kind of how I think about it. So if you're thinking about it purely from a business perspective, I think that that's true.
Mm-hmm.
I think that works. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed success, but we've made it to a point where we've already succeeded, and now it's just a matter of pushing rocks up that hill.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of pushing rocks uphill, there's like three things that I feel like any entrepreneur always encounters. First thing is pain. So, like the pain of growth and what have you, the pain of building things. Then uncertainty, because all you ever have is uncertainty in varying degrees. And when you
Yeah.
scale, it gets worse, not easier.
It's true.
And then the final thing is hard work. Like it never gets easier. You can't stop. Like you can never just go, cool, I'm going to go and disconnect for a month because I can. Like there's some lifestyle businesses that do that, but then you're like a solopreneur rather than a startup founder. But I find like those three things are really like consistent. Like they don't ever change. But Ken, with that said, love to ask or have a bit of fun with you for a moment. So if I gave you the keys to the Matt Brown Show time machine, and you could go back to day one. So that's like some time ago. And that's a lot of growth, a lot of pain, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of hard work. What advice would you give yourself on day one if you could go back to yourself on day
Great
one?
question. I love that question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I appreciate the question because it's easy for me to answer, because I've had these thoughts and said, how could we have done this better? Right? Because everybody thinks that in their own life. We bootstrapped this business from scratch. What does that mean? We really squeezed money and stretched it as far as you could take it for many, many years. The reason we did that is because we wanted to control the technology long term. So if you're selling off all of the equity in your business to a money person, and you have a 3-year relationship with that person, and then you have a dispute and you have to resolve it one way or the other, and they move on or you move on. So you never ever got to the destination. For us, we always believed in the quality and the validity of this technology, and the opportunity to bring it around the world. So we stretched the dollars really far. That was a conscious decision. If I go back to your time machine, I might have changed the calculus a little bit, because having more money in the beginning might have given us some more expertise where we could have done certain things better, faster, right? So it's a trade-off. And we won't know what the right answer is until they write the last chapter of the book of the story, which hopefully is after my years on this planet, but we'll see. Manufacturing, I harp on that quite a bit because we really learned a lot there. We're now in a very, very good place, but it took us so many years. And I wonder if Steve Jobs was here. I'm not comparing myself to him on any level, but like, to get Foxconn to crank out the type of volume of handsets that they make, and the complexity of that device and all the components that go into it. I wonder how long that took and how hard that was, because for us, we have a lot of components that go into our system. And making the box, I mean, it's not an easy thing to make. But we're finally at a steady state, but we're in business now for almost 14 years. So if you go back to day one, knowing what I know today, if I could have tackled that transfer to manufacturing in a way that would have been better, faster, less expensive, more quality through the whole process, I would have loved to have solved that puzzle. Other than that, that to me is the big standout. I mean, I could second guess a bunch of decisions, but I think the other hard part really, and I think everybody experiences this, I don't think it's unique to our journey. It's trying to get the right people. And we've had a pretty good run of things, but sometimes we make hiring errors. It's like sports, you try to put a winning team on the field and you think you have it, and then things change. And sometimes it's not the person themselves, like they're all good people, but sometimes like something happens in their life and something changes, and then they have to move on and you were relying upon them, and then everything changes. So getting the right mix of people for the right duration of time, having that core team sort of mission committed. I think some of the best companies say that they still have their nucleus, right? And we have a very strong team, but we've had, some people come and go, and that's really challenging, especially in a
Mm.
business like this.
Yeah.
Those
People.
two things I would comment on. Yeah.
Yeah, so business people and businesses are like buses, right? They get on at some stops and get off on others. They're kind of like clients, So don't sweat it. There's another one at the next station. It's like.
It's
But I hear
true.
you. It is frustrating. So two questions for you, Ken, quick ones, and then we'll wrap up. First one is, what would you miss if you were not doing biosig every day?
Intellectual stimulation. This is one of the most satisfying intellectual challenges. Our field is so difficult and so challenging. So that's just stimulating. So I would miss that. I love being around the physicians. They are unbelievable human beings. They're like almost supreme human beings. They're amazing human beings. They're selfless, and being around them is just fantastic. So I would miss that. And the team, you get used to working with a group of people, and you build bonds with these folks. It's like being it's like being on a mission, or being at war, or whatever you want to call it. So that camaraderie is also something that is rewarding, even though there's some tough days. That's rewarding, being with a good group of people.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very much like war, isn't it? Except you're not going to die, but it's it's pretty much a lot of similarities. I've interviewed a few Navy SEALs, and they all say the same thing. It's like, it's pretty much the same, just different.
Yeah, no, so I know some Navy SEALs, and we've had conversations about this stuff,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I'd miss those things.
So Ken, last one. Why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Seeing this technology become the standard of care, that's sort of the ultimate goal. Having it, adopted on a global basis, lifetime achievement. And it's so much personal. I just want to see the benefits come to industry. If we can take half an hour out of the time of the procedure, let's say, and we're not claiming that, but let's just say that ultimately is something we can do. That's real dollars back in the hospital's pockets. That can be bringing in more patients, because there is a line. There aren't enough talented physicians to do all the procedures. So it's just real value add. And wanting to see that come to full fruition, I think that's what most founders ultimately want to see, and be able to stick around long enough to enjoy seeing the fruits of that and watching it play out. So that's what gets me going every day.
Awesome. Ken, well, look, thank you so much for being on the show. What you've
Thank
done
you
is
for having me.
amazing. Yeah, privilege is really all mine. And yeah, I really hope you go and you achieve those outcomes that you've shared with everybody today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. You have a good weekend.
You too. Cheers, everyone.
Bye bye.